Now, tonight's presentation will be, I'm sure he needs no introduction. John Lane will be doing a little discourse on service stations and dealerships in the North Brookfield. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Originally, it was supposed to be on dealerships and service stations, but in getting involved in the research on just the dealerships alone took so much time that I think I'm going to beg off on the service station bit for another time. The good one coming. First off, of all the mechanical creations in the 20th century, the automobile did the most to change the lifestyle of its users. Some would say it was the telephone, with everyone walking around or driving with a cell phone stuck in their ear. North Brookfield has been well served by the auto industry over the years. From 1909 to 1987, there were 15 new car and truck dealerships in addition to 2 truck sub-dealers. To the best of my knowledge, they were in operation in this sequence. The Buick dealership awarded to Charles Varney in 1909. I was informed that its place of operation was under the town hall where the police station was located. Mr. Varney was grandfather of Ann Naylor and Donald Varney. This is a thing that Dave Varney put together with the letter from Buick Motor Company dated 1909 awarding the dealership to the Varney family. I also have a picture of the present location. I'd hope to get a picture of the past location, you know, the original location, but no such luck. Dick Varney, great-grandson of Charles Varney, informed me that Mr. Varney had a Maxwell dealership at the same location in 1912. They were produced from 1903 to 1925, and at one time was considered one of the big 3, along with Buick and Ford. As we all know, the big 3 used to be General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. Walter Chrysler bought Maxwell in 1925 and formed Chrysler Corporation. Jack Benny, as many of us recall, made Maxwell famous in later years on radio and TV as a miser driving an old jalopy. But actually, Maxwell had a very, very good reputation back in his day. Next in order of and I've tried to put them all in sequence to their beginning, the first dealership to the last one. Next in order was Fuller Motor Company, who had Chevrolet and Olds at 229 Main Street from 1929 to 1954. This is where Gillette Equipment is located today. It was owned by F. Arthur Fulham, grandfather of Bill Fulham. They also sold Chevy trucks and gasoline at that location. By the way, most every auto dealer had a gas station at the time, which is quite appropriate in today's world. Here's a photo of the present location. This is also a little thing that Bob Potvin put together. It says there were new car dealerships, including Fuller Motor Company, which sold Chevrolets and Oldsmobiles. I remember seeing the first Corvette parked in front of the garage in 1954. For a while, we had a Kaiser Frazer dealer, Quinn Motor Company, and not to mention McCarthy Mercury dealership at the Walker Estate. J.C. Lane was doing business on School Street back then. The next 2 dealerships were located side by side on School Street next to the fire station where the Quabog office is located today. Immediately next to the fire station was North Brookfield Nash, owned by George Kelly and Henry Kelly in 1930-1931. George was father-in-law of Matt Benvenuti, and both men were uncles to Bill McCarthy. I am told that the man, by the way, I have a picture here, told This man on the right of this picture is George Raymond, who was a mechanic at the time for George, and he later came to North Brookfield and had a dealership of his own on South Main Street. The man on the left is George Kelly, and those of us can recall George as a shoe salesman. And he spent 90% of the time sitting on a fire escape next to the Grange Hall. The dealership next to that, behind the Congregational Church, was owned by Eugene McCarthy. He had a Hudson Terraplane Essex dealership from 1930 to 1933. It was known as McCarthy Motor Sales. If that sounds familiar, it's because George McCarthy, brother of Bill McCarthy, operated McCarthy Motor Sales with a Mercury dealership from 1954 to 1956. This is where Mohawk Motor Sales is today, at 263 North Main Street. In regard to the McCarthy Motor Sales on School Street, I have a lease agreement here from McCarthy Motor Sales to William P. Nelson of New Braintree, Mass. That was my brother-in-law's father, Tubby Nelson's father. He bought a brand new Essex 1931 two-door sedan. He paid $740 for it. He put $300 down and had 12 payments of $39.41, and it was financed by the North Brookfield National Bank, which is where the loan center for North Brookfield Savings is today. This is the present location of those two former dealerships. Next in order was the Kaiser Fraser dealership at 111 South Main Street, owned by Charles Quinn. I remember the first ones coming into town with 2x4s for bumpers because there was still a problem with steel after the war. Kaiser Fraser manufactured from 1947 to 1953. As a sidelight to that, they also made what they called a Henry J in 1951 to 52. My dad, who was known to have a heavy foot,
that's where I got it from.
was driving a Henry J on Park Ave in Worcester back in the late 50s, and he got arrested for speeding. At the time, when you got arrested for speeding, you lost your license for 10 days. And he was so mad that he walked back and forth to work for that 10-day period. The demise of Kaiser Fraser was a conflict between the two. Henry Kaiser, who was a great builder during World War II, he built Liberty ships and he built practically everything. And Fraser, who was an automobile nut or salesman, whichever you might call it, right, George? And they had a conflict of personality. And the second reason was that they used a Continental engine for its power plant, and had an awful lot of trouble with those engines. I remember them very, very well. Before Kaiser Fraser folded, Charles Quinn took Buick as a dealership in about 1949 or 50, and he formed Quinn Buick. In 1954, he sold the business to George Raymond, the man that was in that other picture with the Nash, and he was later awarded the Pontiac dealership, and it became Raymond Buick Pontiac, until it was dissolved in 1963. Ed Snelling and Warren Bemis worked there together for many, many years. They were nicknamed Mutt and Jeff. That's fine. In the early 60s, Norm Jake Benoit received the Studebaker dealership and a bit later the Jeep dealership. Probably the highlight of that dealership was when Leo DeLude was chief of police. The town bought a compact Studebaker Champion, a Lark, I can't remember now which it was, for a cruiser. Leo was so large in relation to the car, it was suggested that the front seat be removed and he'd drive from sitting in the rear seat. I don't think that ever happened. During the time that Eugene McCarthy on School Street had the Hudson dealership, my dad, John C. Lane, was employed by Mr. McCarthy as a mechanic. On June 10, 1934, my dad arranged a lease with the business for 1 year for $25 a month. I have the original lease agreement over on the side there. With the understanding that my dad would have all of Mr. McCarthy's business for at least a year. Well, he paid the note off to Mr. McCarthy in 9 months. Mr. McCarthy was very, very upset because he was losing business. You know, he doing a lot of work, but he wasn't making any money. But my dad knew the reason why. He had 4 sons, and they each had auto dealers, and they would come in and have work done, and said, "See you later." So when my dad made the deal with him that he would continue to have his business, that's how he paid, because doing all the son's work, it charged it to the father. Well, that worked out quite well. My dad operated his auto repair business there for 20 years until 1954. I had returned for 4 years in the Air Force in 1952 and had been with him until he retired in 1965. In July 6, 1955, we had a fire there. It did not demolish the building, but it motivated us to build a building at 372 North Main Street, which we opened for business on November 1st, 1954. Now, try to do that today. We had the fire July 6th, and we bought the land, built the building, and opened for business November 1st. You know, with all the politics and regulations today, you'd never be able to do that. My brother Bob joined us in the business during that period of time. And as I recall, when we were building the building, after work, we'd go up and we'd fill the block to make it stronger. And that's when you broke your arm, Bob, or your leg? Your arm. You fell off the staging.
Sure he did.
Yeah.
You know it was bigger than I did. I have some pictures here of the fire. Those are the only pictures that I have of the garage. This is my brother Bob. He's up on a ladder. And the last picture is I'm on the left here, very, very discouraged after the mess the fire left. After we opened the business in 1954, in 1956 we were awarded the International Truck Franchise, and in 1959 the American Motors dealership. We had the dealership until International dissolved their corporation in the mid-80s, and the AMC dealership with Chrysler until Chrysler bought AMC in 1987. During the time my dad was at 26 School Street, he had a sub-dealership for GMC trucks and Rio school buses. Last but not least was a Messerschmitt dealership at the intersection of 148 and 67 across from Joe Hardy's. Bert Cuthbert, DBA Norbrook Motors, was the dealer. They were produced from 1958 to 1962. Bert moved in 1959 to 206 Main Street where Bush's garage was. I had to go on the internet to find a picture of the Messerschmitt. In fact, I called Joe Hardy and I said, Joe, do you know when the Mr. Schmidt was across the street from you? He said, no, never. But he called me back a few minutes later. He said, Irma said there was. It was a three-wheel. That was the only foreign car, to my knowledge, that was ever sold in North Brookfield. Have other pictures here. Here, I have a picture here of my dad and Leo DeLue. This was taken in 1960 when we received a AAA award. And those that didn't know Shabby can see what a big man he was, because my dad was no slouch. I have no idea why there were so many dealerships here in North Brookfield. Because in the surrounding towns, East Brookfield, for example, to my knowledge, there have only ever been 2 dealerships. The Ford dealership, which Mr. Barney, who had the Buick dealership in this town, later moved to East Brookfield, and he had the Ford dealership, which his son Carol and his grandson Donald ran for many years until they sold it to Lamelo Ford. The only other dealership, to my knowledge, was Duluth Pontiac, which was across the street from where Lamelo Ford is located today. That was later bought by Angie Masserino, and he moved it to where City Auto Parts is located now in Spencer. In Brookfield, the only one that I can ever recall, and this was after the war, was Bissonnet had a Hudson dealership where Brookfield Motors is located. In later years, Al DeAngelis, who was the father-in-law of the present owner of Brookfield Motors, had the Dodge dealership. And in later years, they took on Oldsmobile. And we know where Oldsmobile is today. It's all history. In West Brookfield, as far as I know, the only dealership there was Carroll Motors, and they had the Chevrolet dealership. They were a little bit unique in later years because the bylaws in West Brookfield said you could only have one new car dealership, or one used car dealership as well. So if you had the Chevrolet dealership, you had the monopoly in West Brookfield. But now they're gone too, as well as North Brookfield. There's not a single dealer in North Brookfield. That's the extent of my presentation. I do have a little bit more information on how General Motors started and how the auto industry started. If I'm not boring you too much, it's only a small matter. The first entrepreneurs, of which there were about 50, started around the turn of the century. To build more than one single car were the brothers Charles and Frank Duryea of Springfield, Mass. In 1896, they were in the first year of production, there were 13 automobiles built by them. The beginning of General Motors began in 1897 with the formation of Olds Motor Company by Ransom E. Olds. That's R-E-O. That's not the band I'm talking about. I'm talking about the trucks. Rio Trucks was from his initials. Cadillac was formed in 1902. William Durant bought Buick into the fold in May 19, 1903. Oakland, the predecessor of Pontiac, was formed in August 28, 1907. In 1909, Cadillac was purchased by General Motors, and General Motors had been formed the year before in 1908 by William Durant. GMC Trucks and Chevrolet were formed July and November of 1911. General Motors was in the tractor business from 1917 to 1922 with the purchase of a tractor manufacturer in Stockton, California. Here's an interesting point. In 1923, General Motors Lab developed ethyl gasoline. Now remember, on the gas pumps, every pump had ethyl on it. Well, ethyl's a thing of the past because it contained lead, and of course we know all the gasoline today is unleaded. Although one strange thing, up until probably 10 years ago, you could buy leaded gas in the state of California because there were so many old cars that couldn't run on anything but leaded gas. And they were the benchmark of stopping air pollution, but yet you could buy leaded gas there. Ford Motor Company, which was formed in 1903, was one of the few auto manufacturers which never had a dealership in North Brookfield. And with that, I thank you, unless you have any other questions. Matt?
We missed one. You know what, the police station, who was in there? You said the Sherman, they had Hudson's and Essex in there.
Yeah, but Told Barney was in there with Buick, first with Buick and then with
Yeah,
Maxwell.
but then they had them at the police station.
Yeah,
They
that-
built a door in the back and they could drive them in.
Yeah.
And then just before 1939 or so, Sherman took over and he was selling Plymouths. He sold Plymouths there for quite a while.
Did he have a dealership?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, new Plymouths. I forgot to tell you that one. Yeah. They had the floor reinforced so they could drive the trucks in so I wouldn't fall in. The cars, I mean, they could put two in there.
Most of the research I got on this was either the valuation of taxes or the internet or thinking back to,
The Chairman McCarthy, he was the one that run the oil business, wasn't he?
yeah.
he did.
His father was the one that my dad bought the
Yeah,
the
he
business.
did have Plymouth there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Any other
In
questions?
fact, I got the doors they put in. I bought the doors that they used to get the cars in.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, they wanted to get rid of them. The town wanted them out of there, and I think I bought them for $50. Maybe never use them, but. You know?
Yeah. Before I close, I'd like to thank Mrs. Adams. She was without her help, I couldn't have done anything. Anytime I call up, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? Paulette was right there to help. And I don't know where she found this picture, but there's some old guy with his leg up on an automobile. Yeah, this is a picture of One Ice Garage where they had the Studebaker Jeep dealership.
Buddy, who did you say sold the Messerschmitts?
Bert Cuthbert. I don't know if George was recognized this place. I have a little book here. When he built the garage, my wife took pictures of it as the building progressed, and she kept it all together. She did the same thing when we built our house, which was very, very handy, if anyone would like to see that. And then I've got this picture of my dad. This was taken back in the 60s. That little ad showed up in the National magazine. Yeah.
But I have like 5 pictures of Polo Motors, if you want, old pictures of Polo Motors, if you want to pass them
Leo
around.
was a huge man. Henry Hatch was his sidekick, and Henry was
Here's the old calendars they used to give out for gifts from Polo Motors.
Yeah, I have one that, like, 1953, which I was either a year or two before they.
That's what this is. Yeah, 53.
This is Cook's books, isn't it?
Could we borrow these pictures
Sure, yeah,
to have some prints made?
sure.
For the Historical Society too?
Oh, great.
And Bud Lane's as well, they go.
See, that was a great. Yes, Darrell.
You've given a good sequence, but could you tell an anecdote or 2 or 3 of some of the more amusing, oddball, scary, or unusual things have happened to you during your work? The garage?
It was pretty much routine.
You could tell in public?
I love to tell the story about my dad when he was over at School Street. He had to go to Worcester one day, and Bill Salmon, many of us remember Bill Salmon, he had a motorcycle. So, and my dad loved to ride a motorcycle. So he said, why don't you take the bike? Well, they took the motorcycle and off they went to Worcester. And my father driving and Bill behind him. So they did their business in Worcester, and then on the way home, a policeman flagged them down. So Bill leaned forward, he said, don't stop, you ain't registered. So they made a fast exit.
If these cars broke down on the road, how'd you get them back to the garage?
Oh, I think everyone at the time had a record. Oh,
The truck?
yeah. And as I say, everyone had a gas station too. Yeah. Pumps out in front.
How about Dad's first record?
What's that?
How about Dad's first record, what it was?
Oh, yeah.
Lincoln?
Cadillac Coupe.
Sure.
Yeah.
With a crane on it?
Yeah, and a crane, put the crane in the rumble seat. That was it. And then in later years, we had one that was George Rollins Lincoln, and put 2 transmissions in it. And if you put both of them in reverse, you would 2 reverses would give you a 4th gear again, and the thing would go so slow that you could crawl beside it and go faster than yeah.
But does a dealer today have to purchase so many new cars in order to be a dealer? Is he
I have
limited?
no idea.
You don't-
No idea.
Maybe George knows. George, you know?
Thank the God.
Does a dealer today have to purchase so many new cars?
They have a quota.
I was just gonna say, so you don't, probably that's one reason why you don't see your dealers around in the small towns.
Well,
Probably.
everything is big today.
Yeah, it's
No, the little guy, they don't know the
little guy hasn't got a chance.
No. Well, when Chrysler bought American Motors, though we had the deal for 23 years, they told us take a walk because we were too small.
But I still got your old Dodge if you still want it back.
The old wreck.
Your brother fixed the fender on it for me a few years ago.
Well, Huff and Puff, that's what we call it. Old Huff and
But
Puff.
he didn't tell you how he fixed the wreck.
Probably the most amusing thing that I recall, and it really wasn't amusing, it was lucky that nobody got killed. We had a fire call one time, and I had the record, and it was in a thunderstorm. We just got over a thunderstorm, and when it hasn't rained for quite a while, the roads can be quite slick with the oil that comes up. So I was coming down Grove Street, and there was a car stopped in front of me. So the only thing that I could do was go veer over to the left. Well, I hit the corner of the fence where the asbestos was, and that brought that vehicle right up in the air, 180 degrees around, and dropped right onto School Street. And all I had to do was just put in gear and pull ahead and park. But I was very, very lucky that I didn't kill anybody. And later, Chief Duluth came up and he gave me a little talking to, and I told him, I said, you know, Chief, you can say anything you want, but you can't say anything I haven't already said to myself. Very, very stupid things to do.
Please come up and